Oh. You're muted, Karen.
Sorry. We all got kicked off at the same time.
Yeah, it happens.
So, for my professional photographers, we've been around for a while. This is my, I think, third year, and I'm on the board. And we typically do, we try to do one remote educational session per month. We have a barbecue midsummer, and we have a big convention in March. And we're kind of a small group, but you know, our efforts are there on trying to recruit more people. As you know, photography has kind of changed over the years. We've got some really what is it called? Like, we've got people that have been on the board forever, and they will probably be on, a couple of them will be on this evening, so they could probably speak a little bit more to it than I can. But
yeah, I always just like love learning about like, you know, people's, I don't know necessarily businesses or like what they're affiliated with or just like how people come together. I really just like think it's so interesting. So it's nice.
Yeah, I mean, in Vermont, I think photography is somewhat of a hard thing to do as like just, you know, like I have a full-time job, right? Like I don't do photography full-time. And the nice part about this group is it's introduced me to a lot of different types of photography, so I can kind of figure out what direction I want to go in with it, and you know, just get out there and be around people that have the same likes and skills. And yeah.
I love that. Cool. So what do you guys like to shoot? What do you primarily like to shoot?
I think, yeah, go ahead, Katie.
I was gonna say I like nature, landscape, macro.
Cool.
I like to do like double exposure stuff with different images, and most of the time it comes out crappy, but every once in a while it gets something interesting. But that's, and yeah, I love nature though.
Oh, that's
I'm not
awesome.
not much with people yet, but once in a while I'm trying to get more comfortable, but nature, it doesn't like talk back to me. So unless it just like dances in the wind, it can, you know, it's like a nice, relaxing, yeah, it's just very like therapeutic.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of everything. Recently, I've really gotten into baking. We just moved, and it's kind of opened up the doors for me as far as like what I can do. And so this really resonates with me because I want to get a little bit more into the food photography world. And see where it takes.
I know a lot about.
Yeah, we're gonna do a gathering in a couple of weeks. Everybody's gonna, I think, come here, and we're gonna do some setups. We like to practice what we learn. So if you have any tips on groceries or
Totally. You let me know when I should start with the like the lessons and things. Are we waiting for more people, or should we start? Like
I think we can go ahead and start. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah. Okay,
Perfect.
cool. Awesome. Okay, so I think we're gonna start with just some like lighting for food photography, and then we'll go into composition and styling. So everything before I'm just gonna preface this, everything I do out of my home studio, and I live in Florida. And I primarily like to shoot with natural light. That's just because like I feel like I call myself a lazy photographer. Like I don't like the time that it takes to set up like all the artificial lights, and like my studio is a nice size, but it's not like this gigantic studio where I could just like leave soft boxes up in my artificial lights and everything like that. I do shoot artificial when I'm like on a restaurant shoot or something like that, but when I'm home, I prefer to have the space open for natural lighting. And so in the light lesson, we're going to be going over all the natural light and things that you can do to kind of shape the light and yeah, and make your food look really, really yummy. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen and then we're going to go over here and I'm going to just like present this. Okay, and if at any point you guys have any questions, like feel free to stop me and just like, you know, raise your hand or whatever. I'm trying to move the bar there. Okay, great. Okay, so we're gonna go into lighting for food photography. So I'm Sam. I am just gonna go a little bit about me. I am a professionally trained pastry chef. I went to culinary school in 2012. I took their year-long program for pastry. And I basically wanted to create custom cakes and do all that fun stuff. And I did that for 5 years out of my house. And then it kind of got to be kind of like a little frustrating because, you know, everybody wants a cake on the weekends. Nobody really wants a cake on Wednesday at 2 p.m. So I was always up super late on the weekends. And so I kind of wanted to, after I had my second kid, who is now 8, I wanted to kind of just transfer that into something else. And so somebody had mentioned to me, like, why don't you start a food blog? And I was like, oh, like at that time, I really didn't take it seriously. But then after a while, I was like, oh, maybe that's a good idea. So I started learning about food blogs, and I quickly realized that you really needed nice food photography to get anyone to make your recipes. And so I started in the end of 2017, I started and I enrolled in photography courses, mastermind conferences, like literally everything over and over. Like I just didn't stop. And so now I'm a professional food photographer. I primarily work in commercial photography, but I do editorial and restaurant photography. This little typo over here is going to kill me, but it's okay. I am a baking blogger. It's called frostingandfettuccine.com, where I post new recipes once or twice a week, no, once a week. And I also teach food photography, which I can do here now, but I run courses from beginners all the way up to advanced food photography. We're hosting a retreat in Italy in September if anyone wants to come. So we do in person, we do online. I have 3 kids and we all live in South Florida, but I travel anywhere I can for work. So in the past, I've worked with Wusthof, Cuisinart, the American Egg Board, Fox Entertainment, which was a really fun job. I was basically creating recipes based off of their shows for a little bit, which was really cool. Chocolate.com and just like a bunch of others that I'm just randomly not naming here, but it's been really and I really love the world of food photography. It feels very big when you're in it, but then when you are kind of like in your own world, I don't know anybody else like near me that does it like locally. So it's really, really cool. Okay, so today we're just going to be going over natural lighting, color temperature, which you guys might already know, but you know, it's always important to go over, manipulating the light for food photography, angles, and then how to do dark and light and bright setups. Okay, so we all know this, but this is just like an overview, but like light is really just what gives your photo that wow factor. It really can make or break your photos. In food photography, it's super important to have that contrast between your highlights and your shadows because it really gives depth to, and you know, like a lot of dynamicism or whatever that word is, dynamics. It makes it very dynamic to have your photo. So if you look at the difference between the highlights and shadows, you could see that it's just more captivating to kind of have dark parts in your images and light parts in your images. And if there aren't any real shadows, like you can go for light shadows, which you have here with some very soft light, or we can go for more deeper contrast. But whatever it is, it's just kind of important to have both so that it allows you to have just this kind of different tension between the light. So the types of light that we use in food photography is direct or harsh light, which is, you know, comes directly from sunlight. So it's very dramatic. It has those intense highlights and the shadows, and there's a very large contrast. So you'll see very, very dark parts and very, very bright parts. And then we use the indirect or the diffuse light, which is basically like, you know, if you're using a diffuser or something like that, we're gonna have softer shadows. It's less dramatic, but if you don't have any shadows, it can kind of fall flat. And I see a lot of people going around being like, what is the best light for food photography? Like, there is no best light. It really just depends on what the style is of your, you know, your photo or what your personal style is in photography. Or, you know, if you have a client that needs a specific type of light, that is the best light that is going to be used for that project. So I don't like it when people are like, this is the best light. Like maybe it's the best light for you, but it might not be the best light for everybody else. Okay. So we're talking about indirect or diffuse lighting. So light is diffused by using one of those large scrims or diffusers or just basically a cloudy day. I apologize if you can hear my 1-year-old just like screaming over there. He's fine. My husband's taking care of him, but he sees me, so that's a problem. Okay, so it can really give you this really pretty, like soft, ethereal, overall, even kind of look. And you can tell over here that the shadows are really kind of gradual, sort of, I guess I'm looking for. They're soft, they're short. The highlights are not blown out. The whites are really just like, you can still get kind of like the information there. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. And again, we have the soft contrast. Where you will see the difference if we're having direct or harsh light. This shot was shot with direct sunlight, so I had no diffuser here. Sometimes you can shoot it outside, but you have to be really careful with food because it can really change the way that the food looks if you're shooting outside. You can see that you have a really huge contrast here. So like versus when we have these shadows here, they're soft and they kind of just like end right here versus the hard light, which is like a real deep shadow here. And so you'll have very, very bright areas and you're gonna have very, very dark areas. And you're gonna have those very, very long shadows. So this is just like a fun analyzing situation. So you can always tell where the light is coming from the opposite side of the shadows. So we had the light on this side. If the shadows are over here, then you know that the light was coming from over here. So this light is diffused, which again creates that soft, short, visible shadows. And the whites are visible. You can see that there's still definition to them. They're not really blown out, which is really important, especially when you're working with whites. You just like white plates or like a white background or something. You want to make sure that the white is actually there. So like if you buy a white backdrop, it's really important to buy a textured white backdrop so that you have some kind of movement or some kind of texture here, because if you're shooting just on a plain white, it can look like really like almost just like for Amazon, and like that's not really what you kind of want to go for. And then I love shooting a hard light with glasses because it just makes these really pretty shadows. So this light source you can tell is coming from over here based on the shadows from the cups, and you can tell that their light is hard and you can see that the contrast is really, really deep. So just really want to pay attention to how also the shadows are connecting with each other. And so basically, like if I put this cup here, the shadow, and we'll get into this in the composition, but basically the shadow is kind of acting as a prop because you don't want to kind of keep these, but if you cross the cups over, then the shadows would overlap and kind of ruin the kind of light. And so just when you're working with hard light, you just want to make sure that, to use kind of light as a prop. Color of light. And so we all as photographers know that it's measured in degrees called Kelvin. We have the middle in daylight, and then we go lower to sunrise and higher to clear blue sky, and the different times of the day and the different directions are going to give you different light color temperatures. So for food photography, I really like shooting on a south-facing window, which is really great because it gives a really, really nice light, or a north-facing window, northwest. Eastern windows are kind of hard to shoot in. So usually for food photography, the best, quote unquote, best type of window or the easiest type of window to kind of shoot on is usually like a south or a north or northwest. I shoot in like a northwest window, and it's floor to ceiling, so it really allows for a lot of light and sometimes too much light where I have to tone it down a bit. Okay, so color temperature of light is high, it was going to be more blue. If the color temperature of light is low, it's going to be more on the red or yellow scale. Sunrise to sunset, golden hour, we're going to have that warm orangey glow. I tend to not really shoot so much in the mornings in my studio just because the light is really, really blue, and I like warmer tones. And so I'm usually shooting towards the afternoon and into even the evening in the summer months, which is really nice. And then the gray light, I really love cloudy days to have like that really diffused, even light, because that's really helpful and I don't really need to shape it. Okay, so what does this all mean? It means it's going to affect the white balance of your photo. Which is why some photos come out looking blue or can come out looking yellow. Again, shooting at different times of the day are going to give you different light. So if a lot of times I'll have students, just leave, which you'll see in a second, like leave an apple down on the backdrop and then just come back every hour and take a shot just to kind of like test the light and see when your favorite light is throughout the day. What is white balance? White balance balances out the colors in your image to make sure the whites are neutral and they don't have that yellow or blue tint to it. When it comes out and the light is more blue, you can always, in post-processing, add it more yellow to balance it out and vice versa. Okay, so you can see here the difference in these photos. So this is a espresso cupcake. This is too blue, this is neutral, and this is too warm. And really there's like no right or wrong about any of them. It's just how you kind of want your image to feel. And so this is the one that I obviously chose, but I kind of like this like warmer tones. I always gravitate towards warmer tones. The cool tones I'm just like not into, but yeah, I think this is like really pretty, but it's all based on what you would kind of want to do. Okay, so how do you find your natural light? You need a window or a door. And like I said, the north or south facing windows are really, really great. And what you're going to want to do is look for where the light is going to come streaming in. And really all you need is one good area. All your house lights, all the artificial or ambient lighting needs to be turned off for natural light in your house. And so like sometimes I'll shoot on my, this is my studio. But sometimes I'll actually, I have, like when I'm baking, I have this floor to ceiling almost window that's in our living room and it's connected to our kitchen. And so sometimes I'll just like go there and put something on the floor, because the light from there is really, really nice. Okay, so basically here, you just really want to look where the light is coming in so you can come back during different points of the day. But again, I have these floor to ceiling. This is like a screened in patio. It's like attached to our house. We don't really use it for outdoors anymore. So I turned it into my studio, but it's a lot of light. And so I have to diffuse a lot of it and cross off a lot of it. But you really just want to look in where the light is coming in, and then we're going to kind of talk about shaping the light from there. But as opposed to the other parts of my studio, there really weren't like these nice like little beams of light coming in. So this is why I chose this side of it. Step number 2 is how big is your light source? A floor to ceiling window is going to give you more light, obviously, than a small window on a counter. But we also have to remember that the larger the light source, the softer your light is going to be, and the smaller the light source, the harder it's going to be. So ideally, you want to also line up your shooting surface or your shooting area with your light source. And so the one thing you want to avoid is like having a window that like ends over here and then putting your backdrop over here, because then you're going to get this like fall off of light and you're not going to be able to light the whole backdrop. So you really want to have them kind of even so that you get the best of both worlds over there. Overhead lighting is not a thing for food photography. We just don't do overhead lighting. Some people are like, oh, I have a sunlight in my, or I have a whatever, yeah, sun window, whatever those things are called in my house. I'm like, no, 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 avoid all of that. Because it just creates flat photos and you're going to have literally no shadows, which is really important to have. Okay, step number 3, test the shadow. So you're going to use like your fist, you can put your fist down and just kind of test where the shadows are from your camera, or sometimes just, put an apple down, like I said. Where is the shadow coming in from? What direction is it coming in? Can test the light to see if it's soft or hard light. And again, don't be afraid of shadows, because when I first started food photography, there was like nobody taking pictures with shadows. Everyone was like afraid of shadows. And then once you kind of learned not to be afraid of shadows, I remember editing my photos and just trying to get all the shadows out and all the darkness out. And I'm like, why does this look weird? I'm like, oh, because you have no dimension in your photos. And so this is just like an easy type of exercise to do to kind of test the light. So just take 3 pieces of fruit, whatever, or 1 piece of fruit and literally leave it wherever it is. And you can test the light to see like how it's coming. So this is like soft light, but this I would say also a soft light, but this has more have deeper shadows, and this is the hard light. So this is what I would take in the morning, and this is what my light looks like kind of mid-afternoon, and this is what it looks like at like 6, 7 p.m. in the summer. And so it's just nice to know what your light is going to look like if you have a certain type of mood that you're going for. And this is just the setup. You can see the hard light there, and then the effects of the photos, and they're not edited, so you can just kind of see them. And then finding your light, you're going to look at your area and decide how are you going to shoot. Is it best for you to shoot with your backdrops on the floor like I do in my living room sometime? Are you going to shoot on a table? Are you going to shoot on a countertop? You really just have to kind of experiment and kind of see what works best for you and your setup, and also just being aware of how much space that you have for the type of shoot that you want to do. Again, you can have too much light, which is going to give you no dimension, no shadows, really, really flat looking light, and no amount of bad light no amount of editing can save bad light. So you can have the best styling in the world, but if your lighting is crap, that's not going to look nice. And you can have really not so great styling and have really beautiful light and create a stunning image. So just really, the light is the most important thing. Just we're going to breeze through these things because I think this is a little bit beginner, but I always like to go through them. Diffusers help with manipulating light. White or black bounce boards are can help you manipulate light to either bounce light back. We use these all the time in food photography, or the negative fill cards can help you really add shadows back into your scene, and the distance between the subject and the light. So the closer you are, the light, the shorter the shadows are going to be, and the harder the light's going to be, the smaller the window and the further away you are, or the closer you are, sorry. Okay, so with food photography, we typically work with 3 angles with lighting. And so we would have side light. And so your light source would come from the side. If your backdrop is set up on the side of the light source, you have backlighting where the light source is coming over the back and the backdrop is set up in front of the light source. And then you have this tilted or corner lighting, which creates these really diagonal shadows, which is really pretty. So you can see that this is side lighting. So my light source, my window is over here. My shadows are coming this way, and everything kind of like wraps around to create this really pretty, just like soft lighting area here. And this really works well for most foods. I don't really typically use this a lot with drinks. Sometimes I will, depending on the size and shape of the actual glass. But this is like my number one, my go-to. I usually am shooting light, side light. And then we have backlight, which is really pretty when you have shallower dishes, because basically you don't want to shoot straight on over backlight, because then you'll just kind of have crazy shadows in the front and you don't really want that. But it's really, really great for drinks, for chocolate, anything that's in a shallow bowl, to create this really pretty light that's just coming from the back, or anything that kind of can be illuminated from the back is really pretty. I like to use this corner lighting. It's just really a different dimension of bringing shadows to your photos, just from a different diagonal instead of the light. So that's a really fun something to use. You can just kind of switch it up if you've been shooting it, from the same angle. And so you could see here, you could just look at the shadows. This is from the side, this is from the corner, and this is from the back. And so you want to make sure when you're shooting backlighting, because you don't really want to shoot straight on, because you'll just have these really, really deep shadows. So it's usually overhead. And it's just really easy to see kind of where you are. Like the window is here, you're standing here for side light. The window is here, you're standing here. And the corner lighting is you're standing on the corner. So it's just really an easy way to kind of see where your light is and where you're standing. When to use your tools, you're using your diffuser if there's too much light and you want soft light. You're using your bounce board when you need to reflect more light back on the scene, and your black when you create more shadows and moody. So you can just kind of see here, there's this no bounce board. You can see how deep the shadows are here. And with the bounce board, you can kind of see how they like lighten them up over there. I don't think this is really so hard to explain. It's really just like you just put it up there and it bounces the light back into your scene. It's pretty helpful. And it can really be helpful. Again, like literally I have so many students that are so afraid of shadows. So like if you don't take anything away from this, just know that you need shadows in your food photography, please, because there are so many people still out there that don't have them, and they're like, what's wrong with my photos? And I look at the first thing I say is you have no shadows. And so you could see that this is looks a little bit more dull. the really contrast isn't as nice as it should be. There is some kind of dimension here, but it doesn't pop out as much versus when you can add some highlights and add a deeper contrast. You can see that everything kind of benefits more from that, which is like the highlights, the saturation, everything is just more, lit up over here. You don't always have to think about highlights as like the white part of your images. I think it's also just like the lighter parts. And so even if you're working on a dark and moody image, it's still important to have lighter or whiter parts and then to have deeper contrast there. So a lot of people think it's just like, working with white photos or white in your photos, but it's not. You want to make sure that you're having it with any kind of color, anything like that. Okay, blue light. This is a big thing that we troubleshoot a lot because, if you don't have the choice and you have to shoot at this time of day, then that's fine. But some tips I like to do is I like to use a white balance board when I'm shooting. I obviously edit the white balance in Lightroom. Also pay attention to the surrounding colors in your shooting space. If you have blue walls or you're wearing a blue shirt and you're wondering why there's blue coming off in your photos, it's because you're wearing a blue shirt or there's something on your walls. So yeah, just be careful. So this is one of my photos that I took. This is the original, and then I edited out all the blue light. And so you don't have to be afraid of blue light. You don't really have to have it stop you because there are ways to work around it. And so just like don't be afraid of the blue light. I just wanted to show you what a backlit setup looks like over here in my studio. So this is just some strawberries that I put up over here. It's a back to shoot from, like, I'd be standing right here. And you don't want to block light with tall props. So again, this works for shallow bowls and things that's really you want to create texture and show off something in a really beautiful way that has a different kind of maybe shape or texture or gloss to it. It really works well. Anything that can really like be illuminated would be really awesome to have for backlighting. You could see their photo here and how the shadows are created over here. And then if you feel like you have too much light coming in over here from backlighting, like if this part is too blown out, then a little cute trick that I like to do is put up something that just kind of blocks just like a couple inches of the space in the front, and that way it doesn't blow out your backdrop that's going to be here when you're shooting from backlight. And these were just other examples, I think. And okay, shooting white and bright. So this is my studio. You can see that I really, even though I'm shooting white and bright, I really have to block off a lot of light to make sure that my photos aren't overexposed or anything like that, that I'm having enough contrast in my photos between the highlights and the shadows. And so these are like just these little handy dandy black like I guess they're like those like temporary shades. And so these are really helpful. I actually since then have upgraded to like actual real blackout curtains that I have in my studio now and some diffused material in the middle. But this is like a temporary or easy way if you want to just kind of have to block out light. And these are the photos that I would take in that kind of setup. And you can see how bright they still are, even having to block out a lot. Here are my light and bright photos. And this is, I'm just thinking this was for a client. This was for, yes, these were all for client photos. And then dark and moody. We are really blocking off a lot of light. So you really want to block off as much light as you can to only really allow for the light to come in from a small space. And so you're going to need to have a lot of black fill cars, dark backgrounds, things like that. And you really want to isolate one small area so that your light is only coming in from one area. And so a lot of people even block off just even more so just to get kind of one sliver of light. And you can see that there's still a lot of light here, but this is the final photo from this setup over here of blocking off all that light. This is one, I know it's not food, but it's one of my favorite photos, and it came out in a, I didn't end up blocking out so much, and I did a lot it helped with post-processing, but This was kind of the setup for it, and I had blocked everything with the blackout shades on the other side. This is actually green. It doesn't look green here, but that's fine. But I really love the light that I was still able to capture the greenery in this photo, and the petals and everything just kind of have like one directional light going towards these flowers and not having these completely, canceled out by the light. So that was a really fun way to be able to really cancel out a lot of light. And so not only did I cancel out the light from like this side here, but I think I canceled out from a lot more on the side, and this is like the original, and then you can see the edit over here. Last tips on light before we get into composition. So again, to manipulate the light to shine only on one part of the photo for like a dark and moody shot, you really need to block out the rest of the light with bounce boards. So for this shot, we had the light coming from this side. This is actually my friend's studio in Portland. And she has like a really beautiful slim window here, and she has everything else that's dark. So we kind of blocked that all out so we would have it coming from one direction. Again, we're never shooting with the lights on in our house unless you're shooting artificial and you can block out the ambient light. Standing in front of your surface when you're shooting and play around with it just until you get to the right kind of angle that you want. And again, pay attention to the colors that you wear and the colors that are in the room when you're shooting, because they really can have an effect on your colors. Anyone have questions on lighting for food photography? Okay, I'm assuming no.
I do,
Oh
sorry,
yeah.
I couldn't unmute fast enough.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm multitasking.
Yeah.
So when you go into a photo shoot, like,
Mhm.
I assume like, depending on what you're photographing, like if it's burgers or if it's a dainty cake or whatever, do you go into it kind of with a mindset already of like how you want to photograph that? Like, do you have certain kind of presets?
Yeah, I think it depends, because if I'm doing it for a client and then the client usually has a certain way, or we have a mood board, or we have like a creative brief or something like that, then there's usually like a way that I know how I'm shooting. But when I'm shooting for myself, I'm really a big advocate of just like seeing what happens. And so like I might have an image that like I think would be cool, but I might also just it really just depends on the shoot. Like sometimes I'm like, these are really pretty. I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's just figure it out. And sometimes I'm like, or sometimes I'm like literally in bed and like an image pops into my brain and I'm like, oh my God, I have to create that image. So it's kind of like goes back and forth, just like depending on what the actual concept is or what the actual product is. A lot of people do this, but I don't like sketch out my shoots because I just don't feel like that's helpful for me. But a lot of people do. And if that could be something that could be helpful for you, so you could like kind of like remember what you wanted to do, that could be something that would be helpful.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
How do you deal with, like, if you're just doing natural light in the studio or with windows, how do you deal with changing light? Like, do you ever feel like
Yeah.
you need to bring in studio strobes at all, or
Um,
do you find that you can kind of still just adjust camera settings and keep that light coming in? Like, what if you
yeah.
would need a photograph when it's dark out, right? I mean, I'm just trying to curious your process with that.
Yeah, sure. So I most of the time shoot during the day. I don't really find myself shooting at night sometimes, but I do have a continuous light that I could use. I have the SL150 from Godox, which is a helpful, and I like to shoot with that, or I'll shoot with my speed light and shoot in like at night. But when I'm shooting, mostly when I'm doing natural light, it's just a matter of changing the settings and manipulating the light, and then also doing more editing, more post processing is going to really be my go-tos there. I mean, I live in Florida, and so like it could literally be like bright and sunny in 1 minute, and then 5 minutes later it's like thunderous and hurricaning outside. And so it can get pretty frustrating. But I haven't had it come across any like situations unless I'm shooting a video where like you can really see the change in light, then I would shoot with my continuous light. But it hasn't really been a huge problem for me with photos.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay. I am going to figure out how we can get rid of this. And then we're gonna go into the fun part. The fun part of food photography, I think, is the composition, and just the styling and everything that kind of comes with that. Okay. So we're going over just like a couple of techniques over here: framing your shot, balance and proportions, and then we have some homework that I gave to my students. I might have gotten rid of the slide, but I'll tell you what the homework is in case you guys want to play around. Okay. So before I start shooting, I really analyze the kind of food that I have, and then I think about the best angle, and the focus for the food that I'm shooting. So, for example, if I have pancakes, I'm not going to be thinking of shooting them overhead. I'm going to be thinking of shooting them on either a 45-degree angle or straight on. Like, I'm not going to shoot them overhead. Same thing goes for burgers or anything like that. Like, I'm thinking, how am I going to make this food look its best? Like, what is its best angle? And then if you have a shoot where you're just like, okay, well, they all have really good angles, like what should I do? For example, for these cookies, like you can kind of do all of them. For a cake, if it's like really beautifully styled, like on the top, sometimes I'll start with a straight on shot and then a 45-degree, and then I'll cut into it and make sure I have all of my angles covered before I cut into it, because like there's no going back. And so you just have to like really think about maybe what's going to be my first, second, third angle, and how am I going to make sure that they all come out the way that I want them to. Think about your lenses. I primarily shoot on a 24-70 lens, because for me, my style is more wider and it's not really so macro. And I remember when I first started, a lot of people were like, you have to get the 100mm. It's amazing. It's so great. I like spent $700 on this lens. I got it. And I'm like, okay, this is cool, but like, this is not my style. And so it literally like sits on a shelf now, which is kind of frustrating, but I use it maybe once a year, honestly. So, but I know people who like shoot on it every single day, but just for me, I love my 24-70. I also for the first 3 years of my business, I used a 50mm 1.8 until I knocked it over with my elbow and got a 1.4. So I upgraded. But I also really love the 85mm because it's kind of in between. I mean, it gives you a closer crop than the 70, but it's not macro, so I don't really need to kind of get into it. Just like some examples of this macro shot here and wide shot. This is kind of blurry just from Canva, but it does not look like this, just FYI. And then, okay, so composition. So there's this really interesting artist. Her name is Philippa Stanton, and she wrote this book on just like composition, and she's just really cool. If you ever want to like an inspirational book, you can look up her book. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but I know that her name is Philippa Stanton. And so when she talks about composition, she says that composition guides you. You guide someone's eyes and mind towards what you perceive to be the most important piece of obviously your photo. Good composition is a thing of magic which transforms ordinary objects in previously dull environments into thought-provoking art. And I thought that this was so awesome. It's because it's based off of what you think is the most important piece or part of your piece. Like not what, might be to somebody else, but what your take is on it. And so when you're composing, it's really interesting to see and, just kind of get your take on what you perceive to be the most interesting part of that photo. And so with composition, it's made up of a lot of different things. There's not just like one singular thing that can kind of, be defined by it, but it's patterns, lines, shapes, light, shadows, movements, direction, height, space or negative space, and your imagination. So that's why it's really great, is because you can tell someone to go shoot something on the rule of thirds and everyone's going to come back with something different. And so there are compositional rules, which is what we start with as food photographers. But it's really important to know the rules so that you can break them, and you don't want them to limit what you can do. So Once you are familiar, it's really great to kind of use your imagination and just experiment and just kind of see what comes up with something. So we're just going to start with some basics. We'll go through them pretty fast, and then we're getting to more advanced compositional techniques, but you always really want to make sure that you're working inside the frame. And you might have to step back, because in the beginning, I think a lot of people think like, oh, the closer the better, but that's not necessarily the whole thing, because if you want to tell a story with your composition, it's more important to step back and, be able to get more in frame so that people can understand what you're shooting. So thinking about things like what props are important to be fully visible, what props are important to be just minimally visible, like maybe just having, half of something shown. What part is it going to be in focus? What's the most important thing for you, for that person's eye to go to first? What is the main hero of the image, the most important part of the image? You have to make sure everything that is kind of like in the right spot for people to get what you want them to get out of the photo. This is the number one mistake I see people making, is not stepping back. And so, especially if you want to post this on social media, social media crops your photo to 4:5. And so you really want to, sometimes like I'll take like an Instagram shot, instead of, the real shot, because, and I'll take an extra step back, because I'm like, oh, if I'm sharing this on social media, like I know it's going to get cropped, so I have to do it. And it's like the difference between this photo versus this photo. And you can see that how different those photos would be if this was cropped. Like you wouldn't be able to see like the cute little hand and like the dipping, the whole composition in the front of like the foreground and everything. So it really does make a difference, for you to take it that extra step back, because you can always crop in and you can't go out. Okay, rule of thirds, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, just in terms of food photography. We're placing these things on the intersecting lines over here. And I apologize because all these photos seem to be a little bit blurry from Canva. I promise they don't look like these in real life. So especially with like things that are kind of going to be like the wow factor, you really want to make sure that you are placing them in places which strategically and, just work really well. And so you could see here that I could put these the little gooey parts on the lines here, and I made sure that the cut from the brownies was on this line, and the interesting areas were kind of, the parts of the brownies that were moved around and were more interesting were kind of on the grid there. You could just kind of see what this photo looks like without it. It makes me want them right now. Another example of the way that we can use rule of thirds in food photography is we can use 2/3 up of the frame in a way here, and then leave the rest for negative space. And so like you could see that from here to the bottom, we're using up this whole area here, so you can really just like get a feel for being in that space. And then the top is left really more open. So you have a lot of wild stuff going on, lots of different, just like a whole scene, just different colors and movements and patterns and shapes, everything, lots of stuff, lots of things happening down here, and it's contrasted by the emptiness on the top there. Again, with the negative space, it's just used in food photography to push your viewer's eye into the direction of all the action in the photo, and it just kind of helps out and balance what's going on in there. So if you have a lot going on in one part of the photo, it's nice to kind of break up and give your eye a break by allowing to have that negative space there. Especially when you're working with lots of little things. So these are like mini cheesecake bites. And it's you'll find when you start shooting with food that the smaller objects, or like the many smaller objects, are much harder, or I guess more difficult to kind of compose, just because there's so many of them and they're so little. And so it can get kind of frustrating to compose images that have lots of multiples in them. And so this negative space is a really fun way to be able to kind of combat that and not get frustrated by tiny things. Here's just some more examples of some negative space here. You could see that we're using this area to kind of push your eye into here, and there's a lot going on out of the frame. And this also works for editorial a lot, because if you have words that need to be put in a magazine, you know, you can kind of use that, make sure that you have an overlay or something like that, and you can like insert it into the picture to see where your words are going to be. But this really helps out with editorial photography. And then this is just like setting a scene, creating a scene, where I really like this shot that it's just like, you know, we're going the wrong way. Where, you know, we have a lot of, you know, setting the scene of a table, people coming in and eating and everything, but obviously no one's there. And so it's nice to have, I like this photo of just the table, kind of taking up a lot of that space, or the space on the bottom and then the negative space on top. Okay, the rule of odds. This is something that is really also helpful in food photography. It's just you're working with an odd number of props or food, especially when you're working with small multiples. Because when you work with even numbers and you're looking at a photo, your brain is trying to group them into pairs. And so instead of seeing each element individually, it kind of groups them into a group. And so you miss out on kind of the individuality of it. Also, when you're working with odd numbers, it creates a middle, and so your focus goes to one place. And so easy way to do this in food photography is to just frame your subject like this, where you put the main subject in the middle or something more exciting in the middle, and on the two corners of one side, you can just add another subject or something there. But you're leading the lines, which we'll get into in a second, towards this thing here, and that's going to be like the hero part of your image. Just have some more examples. It's really also great to stick with 3 or 5 in your images as your rule of odds, because once you kind of get over 7, your brain kind of gets a little bit crazy and it starts putting things into pairs anyway. And so it's helpful when you stick with 3 to 5, unless we're getting into more advanced composition, which we'll go over in a minute. But this was for a chocolate company shoot for them for an Easter campaign, and they had all these chocolate eggs, and I was like, how am I, like, in all these different colors, and I was like, how am I supposed to shoot this? Like, there's a million of them. And so I put them into cups instead, and then kind of use the rule of odds 1, 2, 3 over here, instead of having to shoot them all together, because that would have been really like not fun. Just some more example of the rule of odds, and how you can see I have 3s here, so I cut this into 3 pieces. A rule of thumb for me whenever I'm shooting overhead pies or anything like that, I always advise to not take one slice out and pull it out, because then it just always ends up looking like Pac-Man, and like I can't unsee it. And so when you're shooting overhead on pies or anything, cakes that you're taking a slice out of, take out more than one, and then kind of, you know, work around something like that, because when you take one out, like if I took all these pieces out, it would, like, imagine just this thing without these things here, it would look like Pac-Man. So something to keep in mind. And then you can see there's 3 things here on a triangle, which you'll see in a second. And then for here, I actually have 2 ways of working at it. I had 3 cups and 5 cones here. So we're doing double time on that. Okay, leading lines. Leading lines is one of my most favorite ways to compose or pay attention to how you're styling an image or a scene. And so your lines are going to create movement and add direction and energy into your composition. They can be horizontal, vertical, diagonal, really any way. Just paying attention to those lines and where they're leading to can really add so much to your photos. And so you can see here that we're really using a lot of different lines here. And you can see I'm even breaking up the lines just to add a little bit more excitement to the photo. And again, once you know the rules, it's fun to break them. So we have lines going this way, we have lines coming up, we have lines going over there, we have even paying attention to the lines of the layers of the cake. It's really important to pay attention to like where everything is going to. We have lines here, we have a line this way, so many lines. More examples here. Here, this is for a client for a pizza shoot. This is just paying attention to the lines over here. this is one of my favorites also. Just there were so many lines in this photo, which I think I break down in the next thing here. But basically, when you have a straight line, a vertical line, it really helps to like command attention, and it's very powerful. And then when you have diagonal lines, like in this picture of the rainbow cookies, it really just helps with movement and moving your eye up, down, and around the photo. And so it's, you know, it's important to understand just like the different types of lines, and what they can convey in your image when you're creating them. Okay, I think these are just more examples, even though this photo is a repeat. This is a pumpkin chocolate cake that was a really fun shoot. Just kind of breaking up all the different rectangles that we have here, and then kind of repeating and repetitive shapes that we have. And we'll get into that also. It's another compositional technique, but you have all the circles here, circle, circle, circles, and then we have all our rectangles here in this space. So repetitive shapes is also really going to help you with your composition. When you have leading lines, just paying attention to like really every single line that you can have, because the point of the lines in a image of food photography is to really lead your eyes up, down, around the image, and kind of like basically have the viewer being like, what is it about this photo that I cannot stop looking at it? Like, why can I not stop looking at this photo? And it's usually because that there's so many lines or repeating patterns that your brain is just like going crazy because you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then your brain can't figure it out. And so your lines can really be created with just so many different things. It can be with light or food, props, like any shadows. It really could just be created through really anything. And so just really trying to see how many lines you can kind of create in your photos is really going to help you create a more dynamic photo. So you can see here some examples. We have, you know, different ways of creating lines. And so this is like an indirect line because there's no like actual shape here, but you can see I kind of put the cookies in this way that kind of leads your eye up to this photo. And so you kind of just want to keep the viewer looking around the photo here. This is a different way that I created a line here. You could see the line from the paper is pointing to the bite shot here. So like making the lines kind of point towards the most exciting part of the photo is also something that's helpful. And you can see that the brownie over here is pointing, like their actual lines are pointing again to this most thing. Actually, every line is kind of pointing you here. All roads lead to this brownie over here. And so that's a really helpful way to kind of create a way for someone to see what's the most important and what's the most exciting part of your image. When you're drizzling and you're adding things to baked goods or things like that, pay attention to the way that you're drizzling things and the way that the lines of the drizzle are happening, because if you're scattering them everywhere like this, it's just not going to be as pleasing as it would be if they were all in a diagonal line, or if they were, you know, leading to each other in a diagonal way. So it's just important when you are not even necessarily shooting, because the way that you should be thinking about your food is you're thinking about the way that you can shoot it before you even make the food. So I have to know that I'm going to be using a drizzle, and I want to know that I'm going to be drizzling it in a way that is appealing and is enticing to the viewer. And so when I'm going to make these cookies, I'm thinking, okay, what is the end result going to be so that I can come up with a really beautiful composition? Do we have any questions so far? Anyone? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Karen, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say this is awesome.
Oh,
Thank
yay,
you.
great. So happy. This is before I cut the cookies, the rainbow cookies. I a lot of times, you know, you could, if you're having a hard time coming up with compositions or things like that, it's helpful to go onto Pinterest and just kind of get your brain working, because photos trigger your artist's brain. And so you could be thinking, oh my God, I have no idea how to shoot this. I have no idea what I'm doing. The only thing you want to avoid is kind of like completely copying a person's image, unless you're doing it just to understand how light works or how something works, and not passing it off as your own. That's like a learning, you know, something that you can learn, if you're doing it to learn, I totally think that's fine. Like, please go ahead, copy any of my images. I do not care. The only time that's hard is if it's really, if you're trying to come up with your own thing and you're trying to, stretch your creativity, then it kind of can like get a little bit iffy over there. And so sometimes I like to just play around with my food. Oh, I'll definitely go over, I'm just reading the chat here. I'll go over backdrops and things at the end. But sometimes I like to look at the images and see kind of what everyone is doing and then kind of be like, well, how can I make this different? So if everyone is shooting something overhead or everyone is using their hand in a certain position, maybe I can use my hand in a different way, or maybe I can put this in a different way. And so this was one of those times where I kind of saw these cookies being shot in the same way over and over again. And I was like, okay, well, maybe what can I do to them before I start cutting them? Like, how can I arrange this in an interesting way that shows the process of shooting? So the process of shooting food is also really interesting for some people. And it's something that I do a lot on my blog, because for my blog, people need to see how the photos are, or how the recipe is made. And so when I was shooting these, I was like, oh, like the process of shooting them is cutting them first into longer bars. And then I was just kind of intrigued by the lines that were created here. And so as just like a fun storytelling element, I cut one over here, and then you can see I really go up and down here. We have so many just like different lines, and instead of just kind of leaving it where it was, I obviously like, manipulated it into a different way, but just kind of made it more interesting. Instead of just kind of cutting them straight down and taking a shot, I wanted to add more dimension. Wanted to add more shadow, more light, because the light is going to hit differently when when it has these different cuts in it, versus if I just cut them all straight and left it there, you wouldn't get this dimension over here or over here. It would be a completely different image. So I think it's like important for you to, number one, see what people are doing and try it if you want to learn and you need to like understand how something is working, but also maybe think outside the box and be like, okay, everyone does it this way, I'm going to try to do it differently. And that is something that I like to do a lot. And then these are just more images that I got from this shoot. Again, also, it's always the ones that I play with where I'm just like, let me see what's going to happen. These are always my favorite, my favorite photos. But you could see here that let me just make sure the next slide. Yeah, we're going to go over it. Okay. Oops. Got a little lost. I'm just wanted to make sure I had my lines on the next slide so we can really go do a deep dive in there. But you can see there's like so many lines happening. We have the parchment paper, which is the base. And then you have obviously the lines from all the layers over here. Then we have the knife. You also have the lines in the chocolate that was smothered on top. And just like, again, with multiples, it can get really hard, small multiples. And so thinking, how can you arrange something in a way that can be pleasing and not just, okay, these have lines, but this has a line. And if I turn this way, and if I flip this over this way, but I keep these straight, how many different lines can you create? And then from this photo, I just cropped it and turned it into this. And so this was a knife, it's from Material Kitchen. I really like their knives because they're pretty and they work, and I use them in my photos, which is not something I would say for all knives. And so, this is not something that I did for them, but it could be like a campaign that you can be like, okay, like this would be a shot. This is a shot kind of like of the recipe, but for a brand, like this could be a shot of their knife, because it changed. You could see how the photo kind of changes. Whereas I think in this photo, you're really looking more at the cookies or cake or whatever you want to call it. It's really more part of the story, the cake. But then when you crop in, you're like, oh, the hero of this image is now this knife. And so it's just an interesting way to be able to get more out of your images, is by cropping them and just looking at different, I guess, different, ways that you can kind of tell the story throughout your images. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, you can just see how we have all the lines here. So started off here, and then we went kind of up. We're going up this way, and this goes this way, and this goes this way, and this goes up this way. And then when we cropped it, we still have all the lines kind of leading your eye up, down, and around the photos. Just want to make sure there's nothing there missing. Okay, more examples of lines here. When you're swirling something, it's really great to have your lines here. And I like that the lines are going this way because it leads your eye to this here. Instead, if they were going this way, it wouldn't lead your eye to anything. You would be looking at this. And so just think about where your eye is going with the lines. You can also see that this is using the rule of odds. I framed both sides over here with two different things. And so you really will ultimately see how to use different compositional or multiple compositional techniques in your photos. And I'm telling you these things, it will start coming naturally to you. I know it can feel really overwhelming because there are so many compositional techniques, like we're not even halfway through these slides. And it can feel a little bit overwhelming to have all these, but you don't have to put all of the compositional techniques into one photo. You don't have to. It's just that there are options, and like shouldn't feel like, oh, I have no idea what to do with these photos, because you have so many different options. But it can feel a little bit overwhelming, but it will over time become second nature to you if you can practice it and you can kind of stretch your creativity on this. This was an easier type of line situation. You can see that the photo is kind of leading up this way. And then I had the basil leaves that are kind of directing your eye to be like, don't come out of the frame. Like, we're still paying attention to the tomatoes here. But it's also kind of on a rule of thirds type situation, because it's not, we're a little bit on the side here. I have 3 other tomatoes here, and I have 1, 2, 3 things of basil. And so you can see I'm just using 1, 2, 3 here. I am just using different simple techniques just to be able to use, put your eye, pay attention to how these things are working. The light is coming from here. I have these really like tiny specular highlights, which are the really bright parts on the tomatoes. And you can still see that there is dimension over here, even though this is a dark and moody shot. This shot over here, obviously you have lots of lines going in here, especially with your hands, is going to help. You can see here that I broke my rule of thirds, my odds, because I have 6 pieces of melon. But again, once you know the rules and you know how to break them, it's fine. But I have 3 cups here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 shadows really coming down, but then I have the shadows from the melon. And again, you want to make sure to where the shadows are meeting. So for this image, I had to make sure that I wasn't blocking any of the harsh shadows that would really take advantage or make kind of like, here it is a little bit, but I don't feel like I took away from the photo. So I had to kind of move away a lot of the pieces of melon or cups to make sure that I got those shadows and I wasn't ruining them by placing something else there. Okay, capturing movement and motion. And so you can have like direct movement, which is really just like obviously something that's moving, which is like a pour shot. I don't know what's happening in this background here right now with Canva. So, or like using like powdered sugar over something. But then you can have like indirect movement or motion, which is used by when you're working with triangles or curves, and leading props, using your leading lines. Obviously with these, you're going to have your shutter speed up higher. But with food, it's kind of easy because food doesn't really move. It's not really going anywhere. So you control the motion, and you just need a good tripod and you are good to go. I love working with triangles, and so I'll show you some examples of this. But again, it really, everything in composition helps to keep your eye move around the photos, around the photo. And a triangle is basically 3 sides. And so it's obviously visually appealing. And it's fun to kind of see how many you can create when you're working with triangles. And as you'll see, you can't just like kind of connect any 3 things to make a triangle. They have to kind of be similar for it to work. And so, for example, here, you can see I had 3 cakes here. So I set them up, the 3 chocolate ones and this triangle. This is another process shot for my blog. And then I have this over here on a triangle here. This is so this would be an overhead example. A straight on example would be when you're placing things differently for the depth of field. You're going to be placing something in the front that's going to be more in focus, and then something a little bit back, and then something even further back. And so that is your triangle right there. So that's really helpful for when you're doing straight on shots. And for this muffin tin, again, I strategically took out one here, and one here to make the triangle, because if you took them out next to each other, it would just kind of create this weird composition. And then you kind of I just added a little bit more extra, to break up the photo, or add a little bit more excitement to it. This one's on its side. This one has like its cover, or its cupcake liner peeled back. And you can kind of just see it creates some more excitement towards the photo. Here's some more examples over here. We have these cheesecake bars, kind of the same thing where I took out one here, and one here. This is kind of the triangle there. And this is the same thing. Here's a triangle, here's a triangle. And so you can use these in really any way you kind of need to. You could see that this is overhead, this is straight on, this is more of a 45 degree. So it works really with anything, just got to get a little bit creative with that. Working on with curves. This is like an indirect movement. So like nothing is physically moving, but you can tell that there's movement throughout the photo. And so this is kind of like a leading line, but basically just with curves. And so you can use any kind of curve, a C curve, an S curve, anything that kind of like moves your eye around. And you can see, and I might have another slide on this, but it's fine. We'll just skip over it if I talk about it twice. But like when I was composing this image, I specifically, used this plate, and I put the slices on the edges here to kind of mimic the edge of the same kind of shape as the edge of the plate, and I put it on the right side so that I would have that curve going like this. It would be very different if I placed the pieces or the slices of cake over here, because it wouldn't have given you that curve. So I had to put it more here, and I kind of enhanced the curve with this little piece of apple over here so that you can see things going this way. It's another fun little curve over here. And so the way that I broke this up was to be able to have a bite shot here, and then a little, different type of Oreo here. It was taken, twisted instead of just the same. And then the same thing here. So you can kind of see the curve and the movement along the Oreos. And so you don't really have to have a lot of props to work in composition. Like you don't need to have tons of linens and plates and cups and all those things. You just have to find a way to make something look a little bit different, to add a little bit more excitement to the photo. I mean, this is extremely minimal. It's literally just Oreos and a pink backdrop. So there's ways to do it. Okay, so now that we covered some basics, now we can get into a little bit more of an advanced situation. Are we feeling good? Do we have any questions so far?
No, I think that was a lot of great information.
Okay, great. Yay, good. I know the composition is usually a very, very heavy, I guess, topic in my courses. These slides that I'm actually showing you guys are the actual slides from my course. So again, it's a very dense module. Okay.
Great module, though. Who
Oh,
knew?
thank you.
Who knew there were so many different, you know what I mean? Like you look at it in a magazine, but
Yeah.
unless you do it and you put it together and you're trying to achieve something, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's
That's just the
like,
beginning.
yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I think now that you guys kind of know about all these things, you'll go look at photos differently, and you'll see the photos differently. You'll be like, oh, now I understand why they took this photo, or now I understand why this photo works. It's because of this. And so it's kind of fun to be able to go back to images like anywhere you kind of see them and just kind of like get it now,
For sure.
Okay, let's talk about the golden ratio. I know that this is a really big thing in photography, and any kind of photography, but how it works we're going to go over how it works in food photography. So, the golden ratio is based on the ratio of 1 to 1.618. And so each box, which is what I'm going to show you in the golden ratio, is 1.618 larger than the smaller one. So this is the most, I don't know if it's the most, but it's extremely visually pleasing because you can see it anywhere in nature, and like we're just like innately attracted to it for some reason. And you can see it in the golden triangle, the golden spiral, the phi grid, all these cropping tools. And if you do editing in Lightroom, and then if you don't know this, an easy way just to do it is to press 0, and then it comes up for you when you're editing. And so we have this spiral here. So each of these little boxes are, you know, within that ratio. We have the phi grid, we have the golden triangle, which is my favorite way to compose, which I have lots of examples on there. And so I don't think we have to go crazy detail on this, but like, you know, when you see the seashells, or you see that really cool cauliflower that has the spirals or anything like that, you know, it's just a really pleasing way to be able to compose an image. I don't think we should necessarily be so literal of this. Like, I've seen students who like literally place something like this and you're like, okay, that just like makes no sense. But you know, there are ways that we can kind of create movement, and you can kind of create compositions using this ratio. And it doesn't always obviously have to be like this. Like, it could be flipped, or it could be different over here, obviously. Just this is the example that I have. And so this is kind of like an example of what it kind of would look like. This little watermelon you can see here is kind of like the regular, I mean, the main part of the image, and then there's things kind of like placed all around it here. But I wouldn't necessarily say just like place like one thing. Like, you have to have like an abundance in there, and to make sure that you are, you know, it's working in there for you, but it's not so literal. This is another way you can kind of do it. Over here, I just took out one over here, and it kind of works. And I placed the limes on the curve here. And so it kind of fits in exactly here with the spiral. See if I can move this, make it better here. And then, okay, this is the golden triangle. I don't know if you guys know of this one in other types of photography. I don't remember seeing it, but the golden triangle rule is states that the subject should be composed in the shapes of triangles. And so we have an intersecting, one long line here, and then we have an intersecting lines here and an intersecting line here. And the goal, I guess, is to kind of put your most exciting points or whatever it is along these little, you know, areas where they intersect, and then have it along the lines here. And so it's just naturally, it's actually really weird. Naturally, I gravitate just doing this, and when I put my photos over this grid, or this grid over my photos, this is the one that I have the most of, and it just kind of worked out this way. And so you could see with this photo, this is just kind of like in line with this really long line over here. And this thing is cut right here. Like, I don't even know how this worked out, but I didn't even place this along here. It just kind of worked out like that. And then with this drink photo, you could see our intersecting lines over here, and everything is kind of on a diagonal. I think I just really like working on diagonals. And then we have our little cherry placed directly towards here, that's pointing with its leading line pointing towards the cup. And you can see all the different lines happening over here with the cherries, and how the handle is lit up over here. The phi grid is different from the rule of thirds because it is a ratio. This is a ratio of 1.1 to 1.68, and does not have equal parts. And so obviously this is kind of like the rule of thirds here, but you could see that it's in different ratio here. And so we just have some shots of using the phi grid here. You could also see that like this is kind of like framed the way that I would frame the rule of odds, with one in the middle and things kind of on the side, and just kind of framing the shot here. We have this bundt cake over here, and then we have these pumpkin mousse cups over here. This is an easy way. Also, you can compose if you're tethering. You can also just bring up the grids and be able to align things up on the grids. It's really helpful, but it's also, you know, great to train your eye to not have to rely on grids. This dynamic symmetry, it can look really scary, but it's really not that scary. I just start kind of composing in the center, and I work along on diagonals, and you don't have to like hit every single point, obviously. And this is something I would say, like, to have the grid and do the grid overlay when you're composing, because it's like just hard to just remember where to put things or something like that when you have this crazy grid. but it can be really helpful, and it's just like a fun way to, you know, keep going with your shoots. So this would be an example over here. We have the main line going over here. We have lots of things happening over here. There's a line going up from the bun cake here. You could see actually like all the cherries that are inside kind of hitting it. The main point of the phi grid that's in the middle of this grid over here is hitting right in the center of the photo. And you could see over here how this line matches up, over here how it matches up here. Oops, we're going back. Oh, no, we're not. We're going forward. Just kidding. And so it's just helpful to kind of align when you're shooting. You can see that these two lines kind of intersect right here along the the picture, the mini picture. And the photo doesn't have to be crazy, and you don't have to hit every line. It just kind of helps you create that visually appealing photo without having to kind of guess. So that's a fun one to do. Here's another one, just the same type of thing. I aligned a lot of it on the grid over here, making sure that we're hitting up all the points here. It's a little confusing, I'll tell you that, but it does get easier, especially if you can use it while you're tethering. Okay, so again, using the grid overlay in Lightroom when you're composing, or download grids and use them as an overlay. I think there are ways that you can do it. I don't know if I have where I downloaded them from, but I can find out. I probably have them. They're just because of I taught this course. I have them in the course, but I can definitely find them and share them with you guys. And then the crop tool again in Lightroom can help you when you're cropping. You bring up the golden ratio or any kind of grid to help you edit. And then there's also this really cool app. It's called Wise Photos, and you can download all of these grids for your phone. So if you're shooting on your phone, or if you have Lightroom Mobile and then you want to export the photo, then you can upload it into this app called Wise Photos, and it helps you with all the grids. So it's really interesting and can help you out. Okay, dynamic tension is a really important thing in food photography because you want to be able to have movement again in your photos. And so with dynamic tension, you're using and creating energy to create movement in a photo that leads the viewer's eyes around. Again, we're leading the viewer's eyes up, down, and around the photo. But when you have things that are placed that are causing tension with each other, so basically these two spoons are pointing at each other, those lines are leading here, which means you're not looking at anything. It leads your eye to nothing. So the spoon's energy comes to a stopping point because your eye comes up over here because you're like, oh, here's the leading line. Let my eye go this way. And then your eye comes here, but then there's a spoon here and you're like, okay, well, they're coming at each other. What am I looking at? You end up looking at nothing. But if you just turn the spoon this way, then your eye is able to lead it all the way up and around the photo. So this creates a stopping point and this creates movement. So paying attention to the spoons or forks or knives or anything that has a line, you want to make sure that it helps to move things around the photo by placing things like this one leads here, this one leads here. It's always going to want to lead to something else instead of coming to a point. That's a big one. And so here you could see when you get into more, interesting compositions. This is like, I love doing photos like these. Like I love heavy styling and I love lots of little things that are slightly different. But you could see here that like things are leading up your eye out of the photo, and you don't want to be able to have things that are pointing directly at each other. Here you have this. Honestly, I don't love this situation here, but I think that there's enough happening inside the photo where it doesn't really create any of that tension. Especially you have to make sure and pay attention to all the lines that are being created from the cheesecake slices. I did not make any of these, to be honest. I did not. I bought them all because creating images, baking, and then creating your own images is a lot. And so when you're practicing or you're just really creating for yourself, a lot of times I will buy things. If my goal is to just play and practice instead of becoming exhausted from baking something or making something, because if I have no end goal and it doesn't need to go anywhere, my end goal is just practicing, then I don't want to spend my creative energy baking. I want to spend it shooting. And so these were things that I bought, but then just styled on my own. And yeah, this is a fun way to practice. Okay. Is there a question?
No, I was just gonna say, I love that because I've had that same thought, and to see the images that you create that are
Mhm.
so stunning and, you
Thank
know,
you.
magazine worthy, and to know that it was like a cheesecake that you bought, because I always put the
From
pressure on,
Walmart. Mm-hmm.
yeah, to buy this,
Walmart.
I mean, to make it, but then you're exhausted once
You're
you get,
exhausted.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. And that's
thanks
why I
for
like,
confirming that for me.
yeah, sure, of course. I always tell my students, I'm like, I'm like, when we're practicing and we have homeworks and things like that, I'm like, do not buy something. I mean, do not make something. You have to go buy it because you are going to be so tired after making it that all your creativity and inspiration is going to be sucked out of you. And so there's no point. So please go buy stuff. It's also another reason why I really love shooting produce is because, first of all, the colors are there already and you don't have to do anything. And so it's really nice to be able to just shoot and not have to worry about making the food. So highly, highly recommend. Other visually pleasing techniques, we're going to talk about patterns and repetition. Again, mimicking the food with the same shape props and using different shapes. Okay, patterns, repetition, shapes. These are, oh my God, they're so blurry. I'm sorry if I don't know why. But it's really fun to have just to use different shapes over and over again. Again, like these are really minimally styled or propped photos. Like you really don't need a lot of props to create really pretty food photos. Especially like the focus should always be on the food. The props are really just there to enhance. You never want your props to be able to take over the scene, because then it's not really food photography anymore. But some way to do it, you can use patterns, repetition, shapes. So you can see here, I have these all the same exact shape here. They're all round, they're repetitive, and they're in a pattern. And then, a fun way to do that is to break it up and really just make this more exciting by just sticking this straight line, which commands power, into your photo and breaking it up there. And that kind of creates a more interesting photo. We have the same shape here, and there's another long line that is, again, just creating this really big tension with the line. And your brain is also wondering, like, how long is this going to go on for? Like, where does it end? Again, not really a lot of props. I mean, there's a knife and like a tiny sliver of a cutting board, and that's it. And then we have these apples here. Oh my God, this took forever to cut these apples, but I think it was worth it. And because there is so much happening to your eye, and there's just like so many lines, and there's just like this crazy pattern. And there's a lot of different shadows and, light play happening here because there's so much happening. I wanted to balance out this craziness with a very minimal backdrop here because if you have something that's really, really like a lot and crazy, and then you have a lot and crazy here, it's just going to be too much on your brain and too much on your eye. And it'll also take away from what's most important and what's special. And so if I'm really wanting the viewer to be like, whoa, look at this crazy cool apple thing. Like I have to make this. That looks so cool. I've never seen anything like that. But I'm distracting them by the backdrop, then it's taking away from the actual food or of me wanting to show them what the most important part is. And so there's just like so much that goes into, so much thought that goes into a lot of these photos. It's not always, as I guess, as easy as it seems. Again, the repetition of the shapes can really help create this balanced look of photo. I mean, a balanced look to the photo. I remember I made these donuts and then I actually made these and they were for my blog, but I love this color. This is one of my favorite colors. I love working with orange and beiges and creams and all those things in my photos. Again, because I really like warm tones. And I just really loved how repetitive it was. And I loved how fun and playful this photo was. They're all hearts, but like they're all in different, leading lines, and they're all in different, in different ways. And I just thought it was really just like a fun, whimsical photo. And then here with the cinnamon buns, we're paying attention to the swirls that are in all the little buns here. Those were intentional. Like I'm not just slathering on frosting onto the cinnamon buns. I'm paying attention and putting it in a swirl so that your eye is more excited by the photo. And then we're placing them along this line of kind of movement to move your eye around. And we're having this negative space here because I don't need you to see anything here. I want you to see everything that's here. And so it's really just important to think about all the space and how you're using the food. Okay, using props to mimic your food. Again, this is the photo that I knew I was going to be talking about earlier that we repeated a little bit, but you can see that like I really, the shape of the bunt over here, the circular shape, I put on the circular part of the plate here so that we were really mimicking this like arch. Oops. And then these were this for the same client that I shot those other little chocolates for. And you could see that the basket I chose is kind of like in the same shape of an egg. And so I thought that was like just a fun way to be able to mimic the shape and just allow for some more, patterns kind of happening in here. Okay, this is something I made up. I totally made this up. I don't even know, but I don't think I've seen it anywhere. I just kind of made it up, using the same but different technique. And it's something I do all the time. But you can see here that I'm using a same type of plate. They're all relatively small. They're about 6 inches. And you can see that they're all kind of in the same tone. And so they're all this more cooler gray or white tones, but they're all kind of different. And so, yes, they're all plates. Yes, they're all kind of the same size. Yes, they're all kind of the same color, but you could see how they're different. This one has this one's plain, this one has a different style, this one has a different style. And this is just something that I love to play with because it just creates like, again, another like excitement to the photo. It creates that like wonder from your brain and your eye of being like, oh my gosh, what does this plate look like? And what does this plate look like? And how many plates are these? And it creates more fun in the photo. And so I like using this made up technique that I made up a lot, especially with color. It's really fun to play with color. So you could see some more examples here with this photo. It's the same thing, small little plates, all in the same color. I even use the same color backdrop. And I find that I remember learning that when you use the same color backdrop as you use the props, it really makes your food stand out so much better because, it's really just that big contrast between color. And so you could see that the backdrop here is the same kind of color as the plates, and it really makes the cheesecake stand out because it's a completely different tone. It's warmer versus cooler, and it's a completely different color. So it kind of makes it stand out more. But again, all these plates are kind of different. And then you could see the rule of thirds kind of happening here. Oops. Because, oh wait, actually I have a coffee cup down there, but you could see I kind of wanted to use these darker elements to add some more dimension to the photo. And so I have a dark here, one here, and one here, and they're placed in a triangle specifically. And, we're just paying attention to the lines that were being created. And some of the cheesecakes have little graham crackers on them. Some of them has a drizzle, some of them are left alone. Just anything you can kind of do to create a same but different. And that's just kind of, kind of the same thing here, the plates and the colors and all those different things. Just creating anything that creates more excitement in your photo. Okay, creating balance. So again, like we talked about with the apple slices and, creating that balance in your photos is you really don't want to confuse them about what the main subject is, and you don't want to confuse them about what the story it is that you're telling, and you don't want to overwhelm their eye, and you really want to make sure that the subjects in the frame have the same visual weight so that you have balance in your photos. And we do this by framing your subject, which is what we talked about in the beginning, different elevation points and heights, which we'll go over, balancing out your colors and the space, like the negative space, and balancing out the patterns, which is what I did with like those apples. And so how to frame your subject, again, we're just going to go over this quickly. It's different than working inside the frame, because working inside the frame just means, making sure everything that you want is in your photo is there. But then framing your subject is different because you're going to start with one thing in the middle that's going to kind of be your hero, and then you're framing things around by putting things in the corner that kind of lead their eye here. So these are supporting cast members here, and this is the main actor. And everything over here helps to lead your eye and kind of, when you're using a vignette and it kind of like focuses your eye more on the center, that's kind of the same kind of effect that we're doing here. So the first step you would do is just you put your hero shot, your hero down in the middle, And then you're gonna put things on the diagonals of it, so the corners of the frame. And then this really helps to just push your eye, especially when you have like a crazy type of situation happening with all these lines and things like that. It just helps to really push the viewer to where you want them to go. Okay, so we're shooting straight on. You can have your backdrop, you're gonna have objects in the foreground that can kind of help to frame the subject. So also you can see here, I have these Oreos, like, you know that those are Oreos, but they're out of focus because it's leading your eye to look at the leading line that's happening from here to here to here to out of the frame. And so this is not technically an actual line that I created with a knife or a board or anything. It's just a line that I wanted to create with the food, actually. An indirect line, I guess you would say, is that it just indirectly, you can't tell unless I point it out to you, but your eye is being led out through the whole frame from the top to the bottom. And here you could have something out of focus, like a chair, just to add more elements of storytelling to your photo, you know, thinking like, oh, maybe somebody just picked these flowers and they were sitting down there. So it's just helpful to be able to frame your shot in different types of ways. Okay, this is actually one of the grids that I use from that Wise Photos app. This is the grid that kind of pops up. And so you can see that I framed myself in this photo over here by just placing myself in this position and having the negative space around. And so it's just helpful to just kind of know where you're going and what you're doing. And the line of my arm is leading you down into like this tablescape over here. And just like different angles and things like that. It's fun to play around and get yourself in the shot. It's actually a really fun thing to do. But when you do that, you have to coordinate your outfit and you have to make sure, you know, that whatever it is on your body is not taking away from the photo. And so I wore this gray dress because it matched kind of along with this and the forks, and it didn't take away. It added, it helped the image because I'm adding in the same kind of color story here.
I can't find that app.
Oh, yeah? Did they get rid of it? I'm gonna look for it.
Wise Photos. Not that it's a big deal right now.
Okay, I'm gonna look for it if I can find it, and then I will email it to you when I see it, or I'll just suggest another alternative if it's not in there anymore. Okay. When we are talking composition, it's also really important to pay attention to the height of everything that you have in your frame, whether that's straight on or that's overhead. And it's going to be a little bit harder when you're working on overhead because it can look a little bit distorted sometimes if you're not in the correct angle. But when you're shooting straight on, it's much easier because you just want to have things that are different heights. And so you have like, this is the first one, here's your second one, here's the third, fourth, fifth. And so that kind of leads your eye kind of like starting from the point here, and then we're going all the way up this way. And then when you're working with different heights, when you're shooting either 45-degree or overhead, you want to be able to create that dimension and have that shadow here and be able to have that light kind of move around the photo. But you can see that this is kind of lower, this is on the same level, this is higher, and then we're going up here. So even though you're shooting overhead or 45-degree, you can still add dimension by using different heights. You just have to play more around with your focus and make sure that when you're shooting, you have what you want in focus overhead, because it can get a little bit tricky, especially if you have something in the foreground. Like I've seen people who shoot with vases on the tables and they're shooting overhead. You want to make sure that that's either out of focus or in focus, depending on what you want the photo to kind of look like, because it can end up taking away from your photo. Okay, balancing out colors. This is using a set of colors in a pattern. And so you could see here, we used a white tablecloth. We have brown over here, white here, brown here, white here. And so everything is kind of balanced in terms of the colors in this color story. And this is kind of the same thing. I wanted to break up the colors here. So we started with a white linen, a brown cutting board. We have the white bowl, and we have brown food, and just kind of layering and balancing out your colors here, especially if you are working again, I know I said this before, but to make the food stand out, try using the same color backdrop and props. And so you can see that this is kind of like the same color, and then it pops with this purple, the orange and the browns, and this really, really pop because we're using the same colored table or backdrop and props here. But what did I want to say? This is what I wanted to say. If you are using if you don't want to create this effect and you want to break it up, it's sometimes helpful. Do I have a photo here? It's sometimes helpful to kind of break up the photos, to break up the colors. And so let's say, to break this up, I would put like a different colored linen underneath this platter to kind of break up or add more color, add something more exciting to it, so that I'm breaking up the monotonous kind of tones. And so especially if this was kind of like white in here, I might break it up by putting in like a different, like a brown tablecloth, and then putting this on top, and then adding maybe like coarse dark brown sugar, so that we're just breaking up the monotonous tones, if you didn't want to have an effect like this. Again, balancing the pattern with the space. I didn't want to have this crazy out there because then it would just be too much for your eye. So the rest of the image outside of the apples is really minimally styled over here. Okay, balancing patterns with space. And so again, with this negative space, this is just an overhead example. You can see there's a lot happening on this side over here. We have a lot with the flowers and the lemons and the slices and things like that. And then I just balanced it out with having this negative space over here, and to really just draw your eye and make it just more of an interesting photo. Okay, visual weight. It's a little bit hard to explain here, but you kind of know when it's not working when you see the photo. And so, for example, like you want your main subject to take up the most parts of the frame, or you want it to be really what your viewer is going to, like they're there to see the main point of the photo. And so for something like this, because the macarons I didn't fill them, but this is just like part of a process shot, you could see that they're white and this is really bright pink. And so your eye doesn't necessarily go completely to this side and or to the white max. But also the problem is that this jar is way too big for it to be in this photo with this. The prop really takes away from the main point and the focus of the photo because of its color and because of the size. So you could see like it just like doesn't really make sense for this. And so you want to make sure that the visual weight of your props match with your hero, because you never really want to take away from the hero, because then like the whole point of the image is lost. For this, I felt like the spoon handle was just like way too big for this bowl. And in food photography, we generally work with much smaller plates and smaller utensils, anything like that. It's just because you are able to get more in the frame when you work with smaller things. We generally I don't like to shoot with big platters or like lots of big things, because it's just really hard to do any other kind of styling when you have a big platter or a big, big kind of dish in your photo or in your frame. It's really, really hard to style. So it's easier when you're working with smaller plates, smaller bowls, smaller utensils, but you can kind of see that I felt like this spoon just like kind of really looked weird for this photo. And so just wanting to, pay attention to the size of your props and the size of, what's happening in your photo. So a lot of photos where you can see where, if someone is like, let's say you're taking a shot of like hot cocoa or something and you put your hand in there, if your hand, you have to be really careful. Do I have a photo on this? I might, hold on. You have to be really careful, yes, of how big your hands are going to be in the photo, because sometimes it kind of can look like, especially if the cup is small, you can look like a giant hand. And so you want to make sure that your hands look normal in the scene. And then again for this, if the cup was any smaller or taller or like anything, it would completely throw the picture off, because if it came up to here, you wouldn't be able to get this. And if it was shorter, it would be too much in line with this stack over here. And so you wouldn't really be able to get like the same kind of idea from it that you would if things were kind of different. Okay, some tried and true compositional techniques. This is actually one of the photos I created for Bob's Burgers. It was, it was really fun to be able, I got this backdrop. I don't necessarily shoot with yellow a lot, a yellow backdrop. I didn't think I'd have a lot of uses for it, and I got it specifically for the shoot, but I actually shoot on it a lot, and it's actually really fun. And so this is a technique you can use frame within a frame. You really want to pay attention to the line. So basically I'm just creating this frame inside of a frame, like the photo frame. And I just want to pay attention to the lines that you're creating, because if they look a little bit off, then it's going to make the whole photo look completely off. And so when you're working with larger props and baking sheets, which I think I have a photo on here, maybe not, it's going to be helpful. You know, you can create, basically just put like a cookie sheet here, and it creates a really straight line, like your cookie sheets aren't going to be off. This felt like it worked enough for me, but if you were especially working with parchment paper, and the point, and you want it to be straight, and you want the straight lines, like, you have to make sure it's really, really straight. It's worth it to buy the pre-cut sheets if you want to do like a technique like this, because there's just no way that you are cutting your own parchment paper without it and it being completely straight. Like, it's just, I've tried it a million times. I've even tried cutting, I've tried measuring. It's not worth it. Just buy pre-cut sheets. It's not worth it. Okay, when you are shooting straight on, you want to pay attention to the horizon line, which is the line where two backdrops meet. And you can definitely mix and match colors. It's really fun, but you just want to pay attention to kind of where, when you're moving your angle of your camera, the horizon line is going to change. And so when I'm shooting straight on, you can see that it's down here, and you can see that the pink takes up less amount of the photo here. And then let's say I move to a different angle, now the horizon line, you can see that it completely changed. And so now it's over here. And so it kind of can take away a little bit from the photo, because now it kind of competes a little bit with the glass. And so I prefer this photo over it, because it's just, I don't think it competes as much, and you're able to really focus more on the glass versus just having the pink meet exactly where the cup is. And I just, you know, you want to just pay attention. It's just like not really a big deal, but just if you really want to be like persnickety about it, like, then I don't really like how this line meets exactly where the glass is. And I'd prefer to have this one. But just something to pay attention to, and just notice when you're shooting. You also want to pay attention to how close or how far away you're placing your food from the backdrop. And, you know, if you put your glass really close to the back of the backdrop, you're not going to be able to get any depth. If you're shooting at like 2.8, 3.5, you're not really going to get that depth, because there's literally like no space there. And so it's more important or it would be important for you to move the glass up more towards you and further away from the backdrop, so that you can get this depth and you can get this nice blurred out area over here, and create more of like an artistic vision to your photos. Okay, isolating one part. So this is another example, again, also of like frame within a frame. Nope, go back. So you can see that I created this frame from using this backdrop. I mean, what is this? A baking sheet here. And then this is mostly straight, even though I don't really think it is. You can see a little bit. I'm just really being really picky about it, but buy your own parchment paper sheets, please. But isolating one part. And so, you know, like we talked about, is creating patterns is really helpful, and this is repetition and it's patterns. But just to make it more exciting, you can kind of take a little bit, one piece out, and obviously your whole eye is going to go to this one like piece over here, but it just creates just this more excitement and more tension in the photo. And again, knowing the rules and then knowing how to break them. Okay, we're gonna get into these Gestalt principles, which is just like a more advanced way. I know that this can pertain to all the types of photography and whatever it is, you know, that we're shooting. But basically, it's a series of laws that explain how your brain perceives patterns. And so when we're shooting and we're thinking about ways that you can place things, there are ways that you can kind of use I think there's a bunch more. There's like 13 or 18 or something a lot more, but the ones that really primarily pertain to photography are really helpful when you're creating different compositions just to know how you want the viewer to view your photo and what a person's brain is doing when they're looking at your photo. And so it's basically how you're simplifying things when you're looking at patterns. And so the first one we're going to go over is the proximity, is that the idea that if the objects are placed closer together, then they are most likely to go together. And so the objects that are placed further from each other are more disconnected. And so you could see here that I placed the jelly, which is gone, because in this image I'm telling a story of how I filled up all the cookies and then I drizzled them, and then the jam is gone now because I filled them all with cookies. So you can see that like I placed this here to make sense that this is connected to this, like the jam went in here and now the jam is gone. And now we have these cookies that were placed outside because they're disconnected from these because they aren't the same. These ones are not filled. And so just like the way that your brain is going to understand how a story is told and how the patterns and just the way things kind of are working in this photo, it just can kind of explain things and make something make sense a little bit more. So objects that are closer together are connected. Objects that are placed further apart are disconnected. And that's kind of a way that you can do it. This is probably where I came up with my same but different idea. So it's really not my idea, but whatever. So things that are similar in size, texture, and shape belong together. So again, size, texture, shape, you can tell that these are really very, very similar. So same but different, but they really all belong together in one photo, and they all make sense together because they are similar in size. They're all around 6-7 inches. The texture is kind of the same. They're all matte. None of them are really shiny, maybe except for like this one, but not so much. And the shape, they're all round. And so they all belong together here. Closure. When you have something that's interrupted, your brain can see it as complete. So your brain knows that even though this cookie has been broken apart, your brain sees it as the whole cookie. It doesn't see it as two pieces. It sees the whole cookie broken apart. And so it's another kind of way that you can kind of help tell the story of what is happening here. So like obviously I have a cup of milk here and I have a cookie that's broken apart. Maybe someone has just broke apart this cookie because they're going to dip half of it in the milk and they're about to eat it. And it would be a lot different, obviously, that if I didn't have this half, or if the cookie was just by itself or something like that. And so your brain is seeing this as one cookie and not two halves of the cookie. This is kind of similar. Closure is kind of is this the same? Oh no, this is just another example of closure. I thought it was a different one because there's one that's very similar to this. But it's kind of the same thing, because when this part of the subject is being cut off, your brain understands that this thing continues on. Your brain understands that these are my kids. This is my son and my daughter, but your brain understands that like there is a body that is attached to this arm, and it's not just like two random arms on sticks that are in this photo. And so your brain understands that this continues on into something else. And so it helps to really create this interest and also break up part of the photo while also not making it look like really awkward. Pay attention to also the lines that are happening here. I purposely put the line of this blue part of the plum going this way so that it made sense with the photos. And look at this. This one is going this way. This one is going this way because there's one over here that's broken up and your brain is going like this. Oop, all the way up the line. And so even when, things you might not notice them, like they're there. So now you can go out and look at all these photos, and just kind of see why things were done, and kind of just look at like more of food photography in a detailed way. And so this continuity is kind of the same. It's not the same, but it kind of is kind of in line with closure. But it's the idea that once your eye catches onto a line, it's going to be completely followed until it gets interrupted by something that's not in line with that line. And so you can see here that it's the line is going to continue on, and your brain is understanding that like this is a line here, and it's going to continue on, and it's not broken up by anything else because the objects on the line are related to each other and they kind of make sense. So it just kind of keeps going and keeps your eye around and keeps your eye moving around the photo, which again is the most, this is what we're looking for. Okay, same kind of thing. Perceived as a whole here, this line is it's going to keep on moving, and it's not being broken up here. Okay, we're getting to the end here. I know we have like a few more minutes left. Okay, figure ground is really important. You basically just want to be able to have definition when you have a bowl of something. You want to be able to be able to define the shapes in there. So with these chicken wings, it's kind of hard to like see their shapes, like what's happening here. It's like just kind of like a mishmash of wings. You can't really tell the shapes from each other, and this is like, so you don't want to do this, but you want to do this, and just have this like dimension. So you want to make sure the light is there so that you can actually make out the shapes of whatever it is you're shooting. Okay, so now we're just going to put it all together and just show you how you can kind of use different techniques together. This is one of my favorite photos, but we have leading lines in the black here. We have the rule of odds. We have triangles, 1, 2, 3. We have lots and lots of leading lines here. And we have this is on the rule of thirds. Oh, I said the rule of thirds before, but I meant using 3. But yeah, lots of leading lines, lots of fun color, which is another big thing I teach on, and storytelling is just not even part of this. There's so much that goes into food photography. And this is like, we have the rule of thirds, we have our elevation points, so your brain is really moving up this way. We have repetitive shapes here. We have the lines of the cheesecake going this way. We have the line of and the curve going this way. We have these interesting lines here, mimicking shapes, just really lots of different techniques that are put in here. And again, the same rules of composition and light and color apply for macro shots as they do for wider shots. We have our leading lines here. This is more of a macro shot. For these pistachio shells, I really just I had some negative space here that I just kind of wanted your eye to move around so that it wasn't so overwhelming here. And okay, that's it. I know this module is really long and there's a lot, and it can be really, really, really overwhelming. But you have so many options and so many things that you can kind of do. And I could probably send you guys over just like a composition checklist, which is something that I have on my website. It's like a freebie. I could send it over to you just so that you don't feel so overwhelmed. Like when you're shooting, you can just like look at the checklist and be like, okay, well, which one of these techniques can I apply to whatever it is that I'm shooting right here? And so that can be super helpful if you want to print that out. But I just wanted to say thank you for having me. And you can find my portfolio on samadlerphotography.com. You can follow me on Instagram at samadlerphotography. And then if you wanted to buy any courses, or you wanted to ask questions or do any coaching, or come to our retreat in Tuscany in September, that can be found on samadlercreative.com. That's where I host all my courses. And I'm happy to answer questions. If anyone has any questions, I'm super happy to go over anything or answer questions, and hope that wasn't too long of a presentation for you guys to sit through.
No, I think it was perfect. That was amazing, Sam. And you got through it all in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the
That was
lighting
a
was like,
lot.
the lighting wasn't gonna go. I was like, but we just have to go through lighting quickly. But the composition, and honestly, like that's just like the surface of it, because we also have how do you select your props. You also have like color. Color's big. Like I always start with color. I don't even start with mood first. I literally start with color and then go into mood. And then it's also a lot of storytelling elements, like you using your hands, using like the light, so many different aspects of storytelling and colors and all the things. So I know
Where
there
do you
was,
get your backgrounds?
yeah.
Your
So
countertops and backgrounds.
I have 2 different types. I have wooden backgrounds, or like thick tile ones. And then I have vinyl ones. You really have to kind of be careful, because some vinyls are not as great as other ones. And one company that I really love to buy from, oops, Where did I just go? Hold on, I just lost my Zoom. Where'd I go? One company, there we are, that I really love to buy from is called CBL Backdrops. And they're actually, it's called Capture by Lucy, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat here. They're actually in the UK, but they have really good shipping and they, it will get to you in like 3 days. It's like really crazy. They're awesome. I'm actually really good friends with them and that they're really beautiful. I also really like Erickson surfaces, but that's more for like wooden and bigger and heavier. And I really like vinyl from Capture by Lucy. Like I'm very picky about it because I don't want to get like theirs don't roll up and they're like actually nice. And I've had a lot that wrinkle or like they don't do it for me. Another place that is really great and sadly they closed down their like hard surfaces, it's Woodville Workshops. They're also based in the UK, but they have really beautiful stuff and I think they just went vinyl also. And a lot of props I buy from like Goodwill is really great to go to because it's cheap and they have a lot of things. You really want to buy matte stuff. You don't want to buy anything that's shiny because anything that's shiny is just going to come off in your photos and you don't want that. So, but like Target or just like whenever I come across things, I'll buy them. Yeah, it's fun to go shopping. I like to go to the vintage stores, the antique shops. Those are where I find like the best stuff. So highly recommend. Any other questions? Any other things?
Thinking. No, I'm good. Thank you
great.
so much.
You're so
Like,
welcome.
again, that covered so much.
Great.
And I'm
Awesome.
excited to use some of it. I will, if I use some of it, I will share with you the ones I
Yeah.
think are good enough. Be like, Sam, what do you think here?
Well, I would love to follow you on Instagram. Please send me like a message or something so I can see
Okay.
your stuff. Yeah. Do you guys mind if I take a picture so I could post it on Instagram? You can say hi.
No, not at all.
Gee. Do you guys have a Instagram for the Vermont professional photographers?
I think it's VT Pro Photo.
Okay. VT
Yeah.
Pro Photo. Awesome.
Now you said you're going to give us homework. We're going to get together as a group and
Oh, you
I think
are?
in the
Yeah.
middle June.
Okay.
Yeah, and practice this.
Okay, awesome.
So what
Excited.
kind of homework do you think we should do?
Okay, so I'm just going to go into my my slide here because I think I deleted it. Because I wasn't sure if you wanted it. Okay. So here I'm going to put it right here. Okay. My homework is for you to create 2 images using store-bought items and using 3 compositional techniques in each photo. That is the homework. And then you have to tell people, and then you have to talk about your photo, like why you chose each compositional technique, like why it makes sense to use it in that photo. Like I chose this because of this. That's your homework.
Okay. So 3 different compositions.
So 2 photos with using 3 compositions in the photo.
Okay. 2
Mhm.
photos.
So like I use a triangle, the triangles, I use the rule of odds, and I'm using a same but different. And I'm using that because it makes the most sense to do that for these little plates, because I wanted to have, you know, slices of the cheesecake on the little plates, and I wanted to have same but different because I wanted the photo to feel a certain way or something like that. And I placed this here and this here and this here because there's 3 of them and they're in a triangle, and that makes the most sense. So think about different ways you can do it, and why it makes sense for the food that you're shooting. Sound good?
Challenging.
And then tag me in it. I want to see. I want to see it, or send it to me, email it to me. And I'm going to send you my compositional my composition checklist. And I think the Wise app photos, yeah, it's definitely, I think it's a paid app, the Wise photos. I think I paid for it.
Also an Apple app, apparently, and Android
Oh,
user.
that could be why. Okay, got it. Okay,
It's
well,
only $5. So it's
yeah, it
worth
was like $5. Yeah, I didn't go crazy on it. But it was interesting. So, I thought it was worth the $5 if they could add compositional techniques to my photos.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Of course, if you have any photos that you take or you guys have any questions, feel free to email me or just send me a message on Instagram, whatever it is, I'm happy to help. All right.
Sounds
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Sam.
good night, guys. Thank you.
You
Are we
too.
doing a
Sure.
scholarship drawing?
We can. It's up to you, Natasha, as treasurer.
Well, are
Thank
we,
you so much, Sam. Appreciate it.
Bye, Sam.
Bye.
Thank you.
well, are we still doing them at the virtual workshops, or are we gonna only do them for the full day ones?
We've been doing them for all of them, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we forgot like the last two workshops. We haven't done them.
Well, we don't. I mean, we don't need to do one.
Okay.
This is a short workshop.
Okay.
Okay.
Good night.
It was a good choice, Karen. It was great. Good
Yeah,
job.
that's
Yeah.
great.
So Karen,
her
what are we
energy.
gonna buy? I'm thinking
Oh my
we'll get
gosh,
some donuts from
cheesecake.
Madeline's.
Yeah.
I think we should get shrimp.
No,
No, who said that last night?
I did.
Natasha
Was
did.
it you? You don't even eat shrimp.
No, I
Or do you?
don't. But we could make it look pretty.
We could do
No,
a big.
I don't like the smell of it. It's a
Okay.
gag.
Okay. So pretty things. Like,
Yeah, everybody like make a little list, and Natasha, you and I can go on a little shopping spree together, and suggestions are great though.
yeah.
I'm definitely gonna go to Goodwill and see. I go to Goodwill and get the plates for the bottom of my my plants so that when I water them, and if I overwater them, they don't ruin whatever they're sitting on.
That's a good idea.
So I have a bunch of like different types of plates. They're probably not, I really love her rustic look or vintage, more vintage. So I'll have to see. Everybody say happy birthday to Zoe. It's her birthday.
Happy birthday,
Tomorrow.
Zoe.
Happy birthday.
16. I'm an old lady.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm gonna jump.
Have a good night.
All right.
Bye.
All right.